FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 9/26/18. As always, be a part of the fun, be a part of the show, be part of the debate. Send your emails to kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, interesting. We think we know history. The old saying, history is written by the victors. Certainly that's been the case of the United States' economic history. And person you're about to hear from, author of the book, The Fruits of Graft, explains orchestration of the tech crash, of financial crash of '08. And we're also going to talk with Wayne Jett. We're going to talk with you about the storm and what's going on there. Can Trump possibly win this battle for the soul of America and the world? Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Kerry. Very nice to be with you.
So we got this swamp here, the deep state. It's been with us for a very long time. You know, looking at your work, probably been around since before the Depression. So
long before the Depression, it was mentioned briefly in the best-selling book on economics ever written. It was self-published in 1880. A book called Progress and Poverty, and it sold over 2 million copies in the years between 1880 and 1905. The author became so well respected that he was the second or third most respected, best known man in America. And yet the ruling elite were able to wipe him out of history. I'd never heard of him until I happened to accidentally pick up a book from the shelf that was his book, that famous book, Progress and Poverty. I'd never heard of him before, or I'd never heard of him. His name is Henry George.
Progress. So the name of the book is Progress and Poverty by Henry George.
Yes. Okay. And it was worldwide, many languages, and basically showed how the policies were impoverishing people, making them much poorer the closer they were to the rich elite. And primarily the issue that he pointed out was that the ruling elite were able to buy up land and keep it away from working people and kept them impoverished that way. And he even recommended a solution to it. I won't get too deep in the weeds on that, but it was a very well-respected book. It actually, I got a hint of it in 1979 when that was essentially 100 years after that book was initially published. Mm-hmm. When Milton Friedman said he was asked about, was there any tax that he ever thought was a good one? He said, well, the least harmful tax was the one proposed by Henry George 100 years ago, and that was the one that would be the rental value of undeveloped land. Every other tax would be abolished. Only the rental value of undeveloped land would be charged. That would pay for everything. Plenty of money for the government to do its job, and yet would do the least damage to people who are trying to support themselves and make a living, support their families.
Fascinating. A book I have to confess I haven't heard of, but I see that the PDF is available at henrygeorge.org, and I've got it up on the screen. I'm going to read it, so the next time I talk with you, we'll be able to have an informed discussion about it. So in the meantime, let's talk about what's happening in D.C. right now. I agree, a lot of conspiracies, a lot of things have taken place to really injure the majority of the population. So we've got the swamp now. And in case you weren't aware, the swamp is Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is built on landfill. It was a swamp. And if you've been there in the summer, it still feels like a swamp, much like my current home state of Florida. So we got this swamp, and we got it's a David and Goliath type story, although this time it's kind of like David on steroids. What progress, if any, is Trump making here against the deep state, the swamp?
Well, the progress in the most important respect is that in my lifetime, he's the first, I believe, who has actually engaged in waging an assault, if not a war, against the cabalist ruling elite. That really the so-called swamp is just their operatives, and the one in Washington just happens to be the one in our nation.
Yeah.
And it's only one of the places, Washington being one of the places that it exists. It certainly exists on Wall Street. It exists in New York City in terms of the Council on Foreign Relations. It is an intellectual type of support base for their very much elitist activities. And they have a very sophisticated plan to wipe out the middle class completely and to reduce the population to only those that they wish to serve them. That was spelled out in a very detailed way in a book published in 1901. And it included all the specifics that we've seen develop through the 20th century that included the major wars we had, the major health afflictions, the influenza of 1918, the crash of 29 was called in 1938 by an elitist representative who was being interrogated on penalty of death by Stalin, that he stated that October of 1929, in other words, the date of the Great Crash, was a more important event in the real revolution, that is, the plan of the ruling elite to wipe out the middle class entirely. It was more important than October of 1917, when the Bolsheviks overthrew the Shah. I mean, I'm sorry, the Czar.
Tsar Alexander. Yeah.
And invaded with the Bolsheviks.
Tsar Nicholas. Yes. So but it seems like their plans haven't really been that effective. It's ebb and flow, obviously, but the middle class, up until recently, was really prospering and doing a lot better. Maybe not so much in terms of the debt they were taking on and such, but standard of living wise, look what we have, as middle class members, lots of stuff that the wealthy couldn't have even dreamed of in the time of Andrew Carnegie and Rockefeller and Morgan, right? Isn't that true?
Well, I would say there's been a lot of progress in terms of technical achievement and matters of that kind. However, in many respects, we're not anywhere near we would have been without their interference. Yeah. They have done so much to weaken our society in terms of our education system, in terms of the way we treat each other, in terms of the way public media is used against us rather than for us. In so many respects.
Weaponized, totally weaponized public media.
No question about it, yes.
So when we're looking at Trump, so he's the first one that's actually acknowledged that A, the swamp exists, B, it's evil and destructive and holding back the country, injuring all of us, right? Every extra dollar stolen from us in the form of taxation is a dollar that we can't invest or save to provide for your retirement, to provide for starting a business, etc. So it's really injurious, this inefficient, wasteful, disgraceful state that we have now. And yet, in terms of, I know where we would be 10 times further along than we are now had the system, had real capitalism and free markets been allowed to flourish, Wayne. But nonetheless, as hard as they tried to squelch progress, they haven't been able to fully do it, have they?
If we knew of all of the technology that is still being held back from us, which I believe that the plan underway intends to uncover for us, I think we'd be able to answer that better.
Yeah, well, maybe we'd be taking the space elevator to Mars for lunch, all right, or whatever.
But we would have things such as cures to cancer, cures to all kinds of diseases that absolutely we have the reverse of that now. We have people being poisoned with diseases.
Very true.
Various kinds of maladies. We have this geoengineering. I imagine you're well familiar with it.
Oh, of course.
But it is extremely detrimental to health of everything, and has so far dislodged our natural weather and climate that we may not be able to get it back. There is a cyclical effect on the unfreezing, we'll put it, of the hydrates under the Arctic that are launching methane into the atmosphere now.
Interesting.
So very destructive.
So going back to the crash of 0809, how did they actually do it? What was the mechanism that they used to bring about the crash? I mean, let's forget about subprime mortgages. That really didn't cause the mass panic. That was like a creeping kind of pandemic. It was part of it for sure, but there was more to it than that, wasn't there? Yes,
there certainly was. There were a number of actions taken to prepare for it, but essentially they developed the derivatives for mortgages, and derivatives as a means of leveraging their investments. The oil price was pushed up, and if I could just think back a little bit to refresh my memory about it, essentially the central mechanism or tool that was used to actually make the crash happen in those days was a practice in the trading of stocks and other stocks and bonds, but primarily stocks, called naked short selling.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're very familiar.
That was a primary instrument in the destruction of the big banks, of many companies, and the SEC did absolutely nothing about it. The SEC, from the very beginning, in the 30s under FDR, it was specifically designed as the mechanism to make sure that the big players on Wall Street never get prosecuted in any serious way for their crimes against the financial community.
Yes.
And naked short selling is the electronic super highway to doing the same thing they did in the crash, which was to sell short without delivering the shares they didn't have, and they would do it in the millions, and they could crash any stock whatsoever that they wished.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way Bear Stearns was destroyed, the way Lehman was destroyed, the way Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were destroyed. All of those were done with the full knowledge of the SEC, and they did absolutely nothing about it. I would say they did one thing about it on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for a period of, I believe it was 60 days in the summer of 2008, August or so. They actually declared a freeze, a moratorium, no more naked short selling of these specific companies. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were two of the 17 companies. The others were all the major banks that trade in U.S. Treasuries, that are primary dealers in U.S. Treasuries. So they give them protection. Now, just think a minute for Fannie and Freddie. Those two stocks were the basic grandma type of investment, steady income, no risk. And yet, during the time that that special order was not in effect, they were trading more than 400 million shares per day.
Wow.
As soon as that special order went into effect, that 400 million plus shares traded per day in each of those stocks dropped to about 20 million.
Really?
Shares per day.
That's remarkable. So one other thing that happened during that time was money market funds, which were big at the time, still are. Basically, $550 billion was shifted out of a whole bunch of money market funds to God knows where. But that caused a run on the money market funds as well. Was this all to get Obama elected? Because it happened right around that time.
Well, it was certainly a major ripoff. It was to get a lot of money out of the pockets of other people. $17 trillion is the estimated amount stolen out of the market, out of people's pension funds and out of their personal accounts and so forth. That was those were the rewards, and they're not inconsiderable. They are major amounts in terms of the wealth of Americans.
Sure. So,
but there were also matters on this, the trading, say, of the mortgages. There was an index, for example, that was set up in London. I haven't spoken about this in some time, and I'm a little bit hazy on some of the details, but there was an index over there that was supposedly index of mortgage bonds, home mortgage bonds, to show whether they were going up or going down in the market. And it was specially set up, brand new. And the amazing thing about it is they had only 24 bonds in it, and they identified every one of them. It came out in March of 2008. I'm quite sure it was 2008.
Right.
And as soon as it came out and started publishing, it started dropping. You want to know why? Because all you had to do to make it drop was to sell short those bonds. And you were able to have a derivative. You could buy derivatives that said, I'll bet you that bond or that particular bond fails. And therefore, you could make a bet.
Right.
It's like buying fire insurance on somebody else's house.
Yeah, you didn't have to own it.
Fire.
Yeah, it was a credit default swap type deal. And
so the
we
point
know
is
what happened there.
That index was dropping. And as a result, there was a new accounting rule also adopted in 2007 that said when there is a drop in the market value of any security that you own, you have to mark it down through your profit and loss statement and count it as a loss of current income.
Right.
And so by making that index drop, they made all these bonds have to be marked down, and everybody was calling them worthless when they had no defaults necessarily in mortgages at all.
Gotcha.
So that was the kind of thing that rigged it. I have in my book 7 or 8 different things, at least, all of which were perfectly together. They use those kind of things. There was one particular report that came out during the time that one of the culprits in it had confessed to a writer in New York that they had finally found how they could really make a lot of money on these home mortgage bonds.
Really?
And that was exactly the pattern he was talking about. All they had to do by buying these derivatives on particular companies or on their securities, that by definition would make them drop. And so all they had to do is buy the ones that made them profits for dropping, and their fortune was made.
Amazing. So, all right, so let's bring it to current. So do you think they're going to try this again to try to get rid of Trump, and why haven't they already done it?
Well, I think that there are a large number of tools that they have. They're always available. The one, as far as the market is concerned, may not be the one that is available to them. It's hard to say because I feel that for this reason. I hedge my answer because I do believe that there is a plan in place, a very sophisticated one, far more than I can guess about. About what the tools are of the ruling elite. They're worldwide. They're highly weaponized. They are very well financed. They are far better financed than the United States government or our Defense Department. There have been reports, I'm sure you're aware of already, that a number of their warfare satellites have already been disabled.
Yes.
Just in recent weeks.
I heard rumors about that. That's part of the plan, the so-called plan taking place, right? Is that Trump's plan that we're seeing?
I would say that it is the plan. I believe Trump has reviewed and assisted in perhaps revising it, and is certainly helping in the administration of it. But I believe it is more comprehensive than that.
Yeah.
It has been laid out in great detail, and I'm sure it has to be modified from time to time according to the actions taken by the wrongdoers.
Of course.
But it seems to me that it's moving very well, and so far has been successful in preventing some very major false flag attacks
like
that I think would have been very, very destructive to the American people.
Like that Hawaii so-called false alarm, right?
Yes, that's correct. That's only one of a number, as I'm sure you are aware.
So we're looking at this now. So Sessions is being painted as totally ineffectual, basically a moron, incapable, incompetent, and which is why the Democrats like him so much all of a sudden, right? It
seems to be the case.
Is he just playing this game of the sly fox, waiting to get into the hen house or the sheep?
I believe that will prove to be the case. I think we had an important little piece of news this past week.
Yes.
And the fact that
share that with us, please.
Attorney General Sessions actually has sent a classified communication to the Chief Justice and to one other justice, whom I believe is Clarence Thomas.
Or Thomas, yeah. Thomas would make sense. It's fascinating that you raise that point, because that is highly, highly, highly unorthodox. It never happens. I don't know. Is there proof that this actually took place? I've heard that too, but I haven't been able to nail it down. What do you know that we should know?
Well, I don't know that I know anything more than you know. I saw that as a breadcrumb from QAnon, which I fully credit as being a source of inside information that is put out in a way that is not classified.
Yeah, it's very clever.
The fact that the information in that letter is classified does not mean knowledge of the letter is classified. It is a provision of the law that the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court is in charge of enforcement of justice in the entire justice system of the federal government.
Sure.
So he is in a position, he has the authority to take action and issue orders in a particular case in which he is concerned that justice might have a miscarriage if he does not act. And I believe the circumstance, it is rare, but it has happened, that the Attorney General can advise the Chief Justice of circumstances that the Chief Justice wouldn't be aware of, and ask for his instructions and perhaps even recommend actions.
Hey, we saw it.
Probably would.
The last time I remember seeing this where it was out in the open, and granted it was a cover-up, was after LBJ's assassination, the Warren Commission. That was really highly, highly irregular to have the Chief Justice be in charge of an investigation, and yet we saw it happen. So in that case, it was to perform a cover-up. How much can we trust Judge Justice Roberts? I mean, he was the deciding vote in favor of Obamacare. He must have been compromised in some regard. The speculation at the time, Wayne, was that he wrote both the dissenting opinion and the majority opinion, that he changed his mind the last minute, which is, I don't know of any, as a recovering attorney, I don't know of any other instance where that actually has occurred. Do you?
I don't know either. And I've practiced law in the federal courts, including in the U.S. Supreme Court for 30 years.
Yeah, so you know it.
But in the circumstances there, I would just make a slight addition to exactly how you described it. He wrote two opposing majority opinions.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
That is, he wrote for the majority on one side, and then he wrote for the majority on the other side.
That became
the swing vote.
That became the minority. The majority opinion that became the minority opinion.
Yes.
And hey, these guys, politics in D.C. is a contact sport, a rough contact sport. Put it up there. You might not wind up with a concussion after somebody tackles you, but you might wind up pretty dead in a single vehicle car accident. The car just flies out of control and hits a tree, or a small plane, a small aircraft, mysterious crashes. I mean, you name it. The swamp knows how to get rid of potential liabilities. So,
well, I would put it in the ruling elitist cabal that acts worldwide.
Exactly.
Certainly in every nation, and including the United States for certain.
Yes.
Acts in such ways that its orders are very difficult to trace, and so it's hard to get to the ones that are actually doing these things, and therefore it makes their controls very effective.
And that's what the amazing thing of Trump is. Like, I can understand why they didn't like him, but I don't know that. I think they viewed him as a threat initially, and that's why they fought so hard to beat him. And my theory of the whole election was there wasn't any real vote counting going on. It was just vote riggers fighting each other. Who the heck knows who really won any place? According to Roger Stone, and I think he knows, he said there hadn't been an honest election in Wisconsin in over 10 years, and that's with both Democrats and later on Republicans getting elected. So if Wisconsin can be swung or, basically manipulated, then any other state could be as well, because Wisconsin's government is better than a lot of others, put it that way. So,
well, we certainly have the affliction that the establishment controls both parties. Mm-hmm. There's only one establishment. They use different operatives in the different parties. But the ruling elite controls both parties, and certainly were very upset when their selected candidate for the Republican Party turned out to be not their selected candidate. The ones they wanted couldn't win. Hey. I'll tell you, my ears got points on the top of them as soon as I heard the first suggestion that Donald Trump actually was going to run. And because I had decided some years back that the only way we would ever get an independent candidate that could win would be one that could pay for his own campaign.
Yeah, of course.
And compete at the level that the ruling elite can put money in.
Oh, you're so spot on. And I knew he was going to win when I saw him live at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas in July of 2015, when 2,500 purported libertarians get up and give him a standing ovation. That tells you something. And then the way he handled negative questioning, it was brilliant entertainment at its most sublime, where true entertainment, Wayne, is where you're entertained, where you're made to feel better, and you learn something, right? Because just entertainment for the sake of entertainment, you listen to a performer sing and it's like you leave, and that's the end of it. But real entertainment, human entertainment of the most deepest kind, really is you're entertained, you're made to feel better, and you're taught a lesson. And his lessons,
think about it for some time, and all of a sudden things start dawning on you.
Yeah, it's a difference between most movies and then you see a really great movie and you talk about it for a week. That's real entertainment that leaves a mark, an impression, and makes you think. And, you talked about the deliberate sabotage of public education. I mean, other conspiracy things we could argue about, but we can't argue about the way that American education has been sabotaged. There's no doubt, it's provable, and just the fact we keep pouring more and more money into it and getting worse and worse results is proof, in my opinion, without even having to connect the dots. So what we've lost in our education system, and you were an attorney for 30 years, the most important thing that you can ever teach anyone to do, which is to think critically, which is probably about the only good thing they do in law school. is teach you how to think critically, to question, to break down arguments, to use your mind to disassemble and reassemble facts to come up with some conclusion. I don't want to say the truth because lots of times I do it, I come up with the wrong conclusion. But, they've destroyed all reasoning capability in public education. Logic is never even taught in high school. It's an elective in college. Logic, most important course I took in college. And rhetoric, we don't teach rhetoric anymore except in very few liberal arts colleges. All these things, Wayne, have been done to undermine the educational system. And yet, they're reeling right now. The elites are reeling, and they've tried to take out Trump who knows how many times and how many different ways. We'll just assume that to be the fact. And, you just think as good as these elites are, they really are on the defensive now.
Well, no doubt about it. They are on their heels in terms of trying to regain the ground that they've lost so far. And actually, by the best reports I can get, they seem to be in danger of finally being overrun, and they're trying to avoid that. Perhaps dealing for their survival. But on our point about education, one of the great problems, even now, may not be so much the teachers. I mean, they have preempted so much the textbooks that are used in teaching in school. They have written into stone the lies that they have of the major propaganda media. The kinds of things that do not allow people to know the true history of our country.
All right. Well, Wayne, I totally agree with you. We're a little bit pressed for time now. We want to buy your book. We want to check out your work. Where do we find you on the web?
On the web, I'm at classicalcapital.com. Classicalcapital.com. Classical because I'm a classical economist now.
Same here.
Not a Keynesian.
No, well, a Keynesian is Santa Claus on steroids, You can create something out of nothing, prosperity out of debt. It's 1984 newspeak, Keynesian economics.
It basically is a smoke screen to cover up their real motives for the absolutely outrageously bad policies they are always recommending. Secret actions.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up, Wayne. Well, Wayne, it's been really great having you on the show here. And look, as always, just look at the show notes. You'll see Wayne's site. Click through, check it out. Get that book. Tell us again the name of the book, which I was able to get the free PDF on.
This is the Fruits of Graft, Great Depressions Then and Now. It's also on Amazon, but Amazon takes about practically 25% of the cost of it for its cut of having a platform.
That's called the Bezos tax. And the other book is Progress and Poverty by Henry George. You can find it at henrygeorge.org. The PDF, it's free. Go check it out. Wayne, been an absolute pleasure. We're going to definitely have you back on. I want to stay in touch with you about what's going on. The QAnon thing, sometimes it seems very real. Other times it seems off base. But then when you see things like McCain dying, 30 days to the day on the exact time, and you deconstruct Q's message, and then when are they dropping the bomb? Well, look at the red carpet and the Emmys, and nobody thinks of the Moab. Nobody even thinks about it. And then all of a sudden the stuff comes true. And then the proximity in time to the QAnon tweet or the QAnon post and the Trump tweet, which are within seconds of one another. All right, I don't believe in coincidences, and I know you surely don't. All those things make the QAnon scenario very believable and probable. We want to thank you again for coming on. Again, email us. You got a question for Wayne, myself, just send it to kl@kerrylutz.com. The Twitter feed is Kerry Lutz, and the Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Wayne, good luck. We will definitely talk to you again soon. Thanks so much for being on.
Very happy to have been with you, Kerry. Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.